I was looking through the sources for today's deep dive, and a very specific thought just kept coming to mind over and over.
Okay, what was that?
It's like, it's like humanity has been playing this massive multi-generational video game,
Right.
and we finally hit the level cap.
Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah.
Because for thousands of years, basically all of recorded history, we've just been grinding away at the exact same main quest.
Survival.
Exactly. Survival. We've just been battling the exact same three boss enemies over and over again. Famine, plague, and war.
The big three.
Right. Generation after generation. That was the entire game. But looking at the arguments in these texts, which take our current biological and technological trends and basically map out this comprehensive trajectory of our future, it looks like we might have actually beaten them.
We've essentially won the main campaign.
Yeah, we've won. So the question that naturally follows, and what this entire stack of research is trying to answer is, well, what's the DLC?
The downloadable content.
Right. What is the downloadable content for humanity once basic survival is no longer this daily all-consuming struggle?
It is a really profound, almost dizzying shift in perspective when you really sit down and think about it. And what makes this particular exploration so fascinating is that we aren't looking at speculative science fiction here.
No, not at all.
Right. We are examining a highly rigorous, scholarly extrapolation, and it's based on the tangible trajectory of Homo sapiens.
Mm-hmm.
For thousands of years, as you pointed out, the human agenda was strictly about staying alive. But because we are actively transitioning out of that survival phase right now, the text suggests we are hurtling toward an entirely new, almost terrifying agenda.
Which is wild to think about.
It is. We are looking at the quest to upgrade ourselves from Homo sapiens, which, translates to rise humans.
Right.
Homo Deus, which means godlike humans.
Okay, I have to stop you right there, because saying we've beaten famine, plague, and war, it feels deeply counterintuitive.
Sure.
Maybe even a little tone deaf to anyone who, turned on the evening news last night.
Of course, yeah.
Because we still see people starving. We still see brutal conflicts unfolding globally. So when the sources claim we've conquered these things, I'm assuming they are making a massive macro-level historical argument. I mean, we haven't literally erased suffering.
No. That is a really critical distinction to make right up front. The sources are absolutely not claiming that suffering has vanished from the globe.
Okay.
The argument is really about transforming these forces from uncontrollable divine inevitabilities into manageable technical challenges.
Oh, I see.
So let's look at famine to understand the scale of this pivot. The texts use a pretty devastating historical example. April 1694 in the French town of Beauvais.
Yeah, I read that part. It's rough.
It is. A harsh winter led to a terrible harvest. And in that era, when the crops failed, there was no global supply chain to save you.
No relief efforts.
Exactly. The local population was reduced to literal foraging. They were eating weeds, digging up roots, and eventually boiling the offal that had been thrown into the stream.
Just to survive.
Just to get anything in their stomachs. And roughly 15% of the entire French population starved to death over a 2-year period.
15%. That's just staggering.
It was a force of nature that humans were completely powerless to stop.
Right. It was just accepted as the way the world worked.
Yeah.
Like a bad frost meant your family died, and there was absolutely nothing to be done about it.
Precisely the mindset. It was an act of God. Now, contrast that with today. Nutritional insecurity and systemic poverty, they absolutely still exist.
Right.
And they are tragedies. But the fundamental paradigm of human biology has flipped. For the first time in the history of our species, more people die from eating too much than from eating too little.
That is wild.
The statistical reality is that the average human today is far more likely to die from the complications of binging at a fast food drive-thru than from actual starvation. So famine is no longer a natural disaster. When it happens today, it is almost entirely the result of political failure or deliberate human action.
That is a staggering way to frame it. The enemy isn't nature anymore. The enemy is our own distribution systems, our own politics.
Exactly.
And the sources make a very similar argument regarding plagues, right? Mm-hmm. I was reading the section on the arrival of the Spanish in Mexico in 1520, and it literally reads like a horror novel.
The scale of the devastation is almost unimaginable to a modern mind.
Right. The text details how the Spanish arrived carrying this biological time bomb. There was an enslaved man, Francisco de Igria, who unknowingly had smallpox.
Yes.
He lands in Mexico, and within months, a third of the entire Aztec capital, Tenochtitlan, is dead.
Just wiped out.
Wiped out. The sources describe how they literally had to start collapsing houses down on top of the dead bodies because there was simply no one left alive to dig graves.
It's horrific.
And the psychological terror of it was that they had absolutely zero concept of viruses.
Right. They believed it was the wrath of angry gods or malevolent demons, because what other explanation could there possibly be for an invisible force wiping out a whole civilization?
They had no way of knowing.
They had no microscopes. They had no germ theory. Now, bring that forward to modern history. By 1979, the World Health Organization didn't just manage smallpox. They declared it completely eradicated from the face of the earth.
But wait, how does the text reconcile that with things like the Ebola outbreak or, even more recently, global pandemics? Plagues clearly haven't stopped trying to kill us.
No, germs certainly haven't stopped evolving, but the argument is about the speed and the nature of our response.
Okay.
When the Ebola outbreak struck West Africa in 2014, it was terrifying. But it was contained relatively swiftly through genomic sequencing, epidemiological tracking, international scientific cooperation.
We fought back with science.
Exactly. Or consider AIDS in the early 1980s. It was a uniquely devious virus that completely baffled the medical community at first.
That was a death sentence.
It was. But within 2 short years, scientists identified the virus. And within a decade, it was transitioned from a guaranteed death sentence into a manageable chronic condition in many parts of the world.
That's a good point.
The point the sources make is that if a virus like HIV had emerged in 1581 instead of 1981, it might have rivaled the Black Death.
Wow. Yeah, it would have just run unchecked.
Today, in the evolutionary arms race between pathogens and doctors are generally running faster.
Okay, I'm tracking with you on famine and plague. Science and global supply chains changed the game. But what about the third boss? War.
Right, war.
The text talks about this concept of the new peace. But again, looking at the world, people are still shooting at each other. How do the sources justify saying we've beaten war?
The justification lies in looking at how states relate to one another fundamentally. Historically, the entire world operated under the law of the jungle.
Which means what, exactly?
Which meant war was always a viable, accepted option for any country trying to expand. There was also Chekhov's law in geopolitics.
Oh, like in theater?
Exactly. If a massive army is built and put on display in Act 1, it will inevitably be used to invade someone by Act 3.
Right.
But since 1945, those historical laws have been shattered.
Because of nuclear weapons, right. The invention of the atom bomb turned any potential superpower conflict into an act of literal collective suicide.
Yes.
So the guns are on display, but pulling the trigger means everybody dies.
The nuclear deterrent is a massive part of it, yes. But the sources argue there is a second, equally important reason that has entirely altered the calculus of war, and that is the fundamental shift in the nature of the global economy.
I loved this part of the reading. It completely reframes how we think about wealth.
It really does. Because for almost all of human history, wealth was material. It was physical.
Like gold.
Gold, land, yes. If you were a king and you wanted to enrich your nation, you raised an army and you conquered a gold mine or a neighboring wheat field or a vital river port, you could literally loot the wealth.
Right.
The sources use the example of Rwanda in 1998, invading neighboring Congo to seize coltan mines. Coltan is a physical resource, so the logic of traditional warfare applied. But today, in the most developed economies, the most significant wealth is entirely knowledge-based.
This is the California analogy. I was thinking about this. It would make zero sense for a foreign superpower to invade California with the goal of looting Silicon Valley.
Precisely.
Because there are no actual silicon mines to capture. There are no physical vaults of treasure. The vast majority of the wealth is locked inside the heads of software engineers or existing as digital data on server farms.
Exactly. You cannot extract coding expertise or intellectual property with a tank.
Right.
You can't shoot a server farm into submission and expect it to innovate.
You just destroy the value.
Right. Because knowledge has replaced physical materials as the primary economic resource, the profitability of conquest has plummeted. For many modern nations, peace is no longer just a temporary pause between conflicts to reload. War has become economically inconceivable.
Okay, so if we accept this overarching premise that famine, plague, and war are no longer these unavoidable acts of God, but rather manageable engineering and political problems, we run into a huge philosophical issue.
A massive one.
Humanity suddenly has a massive vacuum of purpose. And as we know, history absolutely abhors a vacuum.
It does, and this is where the deep dive really begins. because humanity is already actively striving for new goals to fill that void.
So what is the new agenda?
According to the texts, now that survival is secured, the next logical steps for a technologically advanced species are the pursuit of immortality, happiness, and divinity.
Okay, let's unpack the first one, immortality.
Yeah.
This blew my mind because the sources point out that modern science no longer views death as this metaphysical spiritual mystery.
No, not at all.
We don't view it as the Grim Reaper stepping out of the shadows to claim a soul. We view death as a technical glitch.
That is the literal paradigm of modern medicine. A human being doesn't die because the cosmos demanded it or because God decreed their time was up. A human dies because a specific artery got clogged with fatty deposits, or because a specific genetic mutation caused cells to multiply uncontrollably, or because a virus overwhelmed the immune system.
Total mechanics.
Right. Technical problems have technical solutions. We are seeing massive, multi-billion-dollar investments from Silicon Valley into this exact philosophy. Consider Google's subsidiary, Calico.
Oh, I've heard of them.
Their stated, non-ironic mission is to solve death. They aren't trying to just make us comfortable in our final days. They are researching nanobots, advanced genetic engineering, and regenerative medicine to treat aging itself as a curable disease.
I have to push back on this, though.
Yeah.
Let's say Calico succeeds, not even in making us immortal, but just doubling the average human lifespan to, say, 150 years. I was trying to map this out in my head, and it feels like it would completely break the fundamental structure of human society. Think about marriage. We currently operate on the assumption of till death do us part, which made perfect sense when life expectancy was 40.
Sure.
But if you get married at 40 and you have 110 years left to live, that is a terrifyingly long time for one relationship.
The social structures we rely on would absolutely buckle under the weight of a 150-year lifespan.
And what about careers or politics?
Right.
The bottleneck it would create for new ideas would be suffocating.
Huh.
Imagine a 138-year-old Stalin still ruling a country because he has the absolute best biotech keeping his heart pumping.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Or imagine a CEO who has been your boss for 75 years and you're just waiting for them to retire so you can get a promotion. How does society even function?
It's an incredibly dangerous bottleneck. The famous physicist Max Planck once observed that science advances one funeral at a time.
That is so dark, but true.
The older generation, with their entrenched dogmas, passes away, making room for a younger generation with radical new ideas. If the older generation never leaves, scientific, social, and political evolution could grind to a complete halt. We could end up with a massively stagnant, deeply unequal society.
Just completely frozen.
But the chilling point the sources make is that despite these immense, obvious social risks, the ideological commitment to preserving human life in our culture is so absolute that we will pursue it anyway. The capitalist economy will pour endless funds into it because realistically, what market could possibly be more lucrative than the market for eternal youth?
I mean, people will pay literally anything to not die.
Exactly.
Which leads us perfectly into the second goal of the new agenda, happiness. The sources make a really counterintuitive argument here. They state that we are not actually made happy by external events. We think we are, but we aren't. We are only made happy by pleasant bodily sensations.
It requires stripping away our romantic notions of joy. On a purely biochemical level, getting a massive promotion, finding the love of your life, or winning the lottery, none of those external things make you happy.
Right.
What actually makes you happy is the resulting release of dopamine, serotonin, and oxytocin in your bloodstream. It is a specific, measurable balance of hormones and electrical signals in your brain.
I want to bring in my favorite analogy from the reading here, the squirrel on a treadmill. It explains why lasting happiness feels so impossible.
It's a great analogy.
Right. If evolution had designed a squirrel that experienced eternal perfect bliss from eating just one single nut, that squirrel would be so blissed out it would just sit there forever.
He would have no motivation to do anything else.
Exactly. It would never go looking for a second nut. It would eventually starve to death, and its eternal bliss genes would vanish from the gene pool.
Evolution has zero interest in our happiness. It only cares about survival and reproduction.
Exactly. So evolution has to give us just a quick, fleeting hit of pleasure as a reward. It inherently has to fade, which forces us to keep running on the treadmill, endlessly searching for the next nut, the next promotion, the next purchase.
Right.
We are biologically, fundamentally wired to be perpetually dissatisfied.
It is a brilliant and incredibly brutal evolutionary mechanism, and it presents a massive problem for the human agenda. If we want to achieve lasting global happiness, the kind of utilitarian paradise that philosophers like Jeremy Bentham dreamed of, we are realizing that we cannot do it simply by improving the economy or ending wars or building better societies.
Because the treadmill just speeds up.
Because the biochemical treadmill will always recalibrate. To achieve permanent happiness, we have to fundamentally rig the biochemical system itself.
And we are already starting to do this, right?
We are in the very early stages. Look at the widespread, skyrocketing use of psychiatric drugs. I'm not just talking about curing severe mental illnesses like schizophrenia. We are increasingly using biochemistry to manage the everyday blues, or to help soldiers cope with the extreme trauma of modern warfare, or even to keep perfectly healthy school children focused in a classroom setting. We are learning to manually tune the dials of human emotion.
So if we beat death by fixing the technical glitches in our biology, and we achieve permanent happiness by re-engineering our biochemical reward systems, it feels like that naturally forces us into the third goal, divinity.
Yes.
Because if we have the power to engineer life and death and control the mind, we basically have the power of the gods we used to pray to.
That is the ultimate destination of the new agenda. But to be clear, when the text says divinity, it is not talking about becoming an omnipotent, metaphysical creator who can conjure universes out of nothing.
Okay, so what does it mean?
It means acquiring the specific, tangible super abilities that ancient cultures attributed to their pantheons.
Oh, I see.
The ability to design and create new living beings. The ability to transform our own physical bodies at will. The ability to connect minds. The sources outline that this could happen through 3 distinct paths of engineering.
Walk me through those paths, because this is where the map of the future gets really wild.
The first path is biological engineering, where we simply rewrite our own genetic code, overriding natural selection with intelligent design to create superior humans.
Okay.
The second path is cyborg engineering, where we merge our organic bodies with non-organic devices. Think bionic limbs connected directly to the brain, or nanobots in our bloodstream serving as a secondary immune system.
And third?
The creation of completely non-organic beings. Artificial intelligence that is so advanced it leaves organic life behind entirely. Whichever path we take, we are talking about an upgrade from Homo sapiens to a new species that would be as fundamentally different from us as we currently are from Homo erectus.
Okay, I am reeling from the implications of that. But the sources do something really interesting here. Before they let us fully explore this bizarre future of cyborgs and non-organic gods, they slam the brakes.
They do.
They insist that we have to look backward first. We have to understand how one specific, relatively hairless ape got into a position to play God in the first place.
It's an essential historical grounding. We currently live in what geologists are calling the Anthropocene, the epoch of humanity.
Right.
We are no longer just another animal in the ecosystem. We are an ecological force on par with tectonic plates shifting or asteroids hitting the Earth.
Which is terrifying when you put it like that.
It is. The question is, how did we achieve this unparalleled dominance? Because as sapiens, we love to tell ourselves very flattering stories. We love to believe we have some magical human spark that inherently justifies our rule over the planet.
I definitely grew up with those stories. But the sources systematically dismantle every single myth of human exceptionalism we cling to. The first one they tackle is the idea that humans possess an eternal, indivisible soul, while animals do not. That was the religious justification for thousands of years.
And from a strictly scientific evolutionary perspective, the concept of a soul is entirely incompatible with biology.
I struggle with this part a bit.
Yeah.
How exactly does evolution disprove the soul?
It comes down to the mechanics of how evolution operates. Evolution is a process of gradual, microscopic, step-by-step changes in physical parts over millions of years. It's a tinkerer.
Yeah.
But a soul, by its very definition in theology, is an indivisible, eternal, unified entity. It cannot be broken into parts. So an indivisible entity cannot possibly evolve step by step.
Oh, because half a soul makes no sense.
Exactly. There is no biological mechanism for a primate to suddenly, in one single generation, acquire a fully formed eternal soul that its parents lacked. To biological science, the soul is a myth we invented to elevate ourselves.
Okay, so if we can't claim a spiritual superiority, what about an intellectual one? The second myth is that we rule the world because of our unique individual intelligence. But the text argues that on an individual level, we aren't actually that special.
We really aren't.
A Stone Age hunter-gatherer likely had a much sharper memory and far better individual survival skills than the average modern human. If you dropped me naked in a forest, I'd be dead in a week.
Oh, absolutely. Me too.
I rely on a massive web of other people running grocery stores and GPS satellites just to function.
We deeply overestimate our individual prowess, and conversely, we constantly underestimate animal cognition. The sources highlight this tendency with the fascinating story of clever Hans.
The math-doing horse. I had heard of this, but the context here is brilliant.
For those unfamiliar, clever Hans was a horse in early 20th century Germany that supposedly could do complex arithmetic. You'd ask him what 4 times 3 is, and he'd tap his hoof 12 times.
And people just believed it.
People were astounded, thinking the horse had human-level rational intelligence.
But the reality was actually much more interesting, right?
Yes. A psychologist investigated and discovered that Hans wasn't doing math at all. He was doing something arguably more impressive for a horse. He was reading microscopic, involuntary changes in the body language and facial expressions of his human questioners.
Oh, wow.
When he tapped the correct number, the tension in the human's face would break, and Hans knew to stop tapping to get a carrot.
He was a master of emotional intelligence and observation, not arithmetic.
Exactly. The lesson is that we constantly judge other species by human metrics. We assume that because animals don't think exactly like we do, they lack complex consciousness. But as individuals, humans are not endowed with magical, incomparable brains.
So I have to ask the million-dollar question. If it's not an eternal soul, and it's not our individual intelligence, what is the real objective superpower of Homo sapiens? How did we conquer the world?
The core defining argument of the text is that sapiens rule the world because we are the only species on Earth capable of cooperating flexibly in extraordinarily large numbers.
Cooperating flexibly in large numbers. We need to break that down. Because other animals cooperate, don't they?
They do, but they lack one of those 2 crucial elements. Take bees, for example. Bees can cooperate in massive numbers, tens of thousands in a hive.
Right.
But they are entirely inflexible. Their social structure is hardwired into their DNA. A worker bee cannot suddenly organize a labor strike, overthrow the queen, and establish a communist republic of bees. They can only do what their biology dictates.
They're basically robots.
Pretty much. And on the other side of the spectrum, you have our closest relatives, the chimpanzees.
And they are flexible.
Chimps are highly flexible. They form coalitions, they betray each other, they have complex social dynamics. But they cannot cooperate in numbers larger than about 150 individuals.
Why is that?
Their cooperation relies entirely on intimate, face-to-face personal knowledge of one another. An alpha male chimp can't govern a forest of 10,000 chimps because he can't possibly know them all personally.
So what is our secret sauce? How do we manage to get millions of complete strangers who have never met and will never meet to cooperate on massive projects like building a highway system or fighting a world war?
This is perhaps the most profound concept in the entire deep dive. We do it through our unique biological ability to create and believe in fictions. The sources call this intersubjective reality.
This was the moment in the reading where my brain just kind of broke. Because we usually think of reality in 2 ways. There's objective reality, things that exist regardless of what we think about them, a river, a mountain, a lion. If I stop believing in a lion, it will still eat me.
Correct.
And then there is subjective reality, your internal personal feelings, your fear of the lion, your joy at seeing a friend. That reality exists only inside your individual consciousness.
Yes.
Right? But the text argues that sapiens live in a third, totally unique layer, the intersubjective, the stories we collectively believe. And they put things in this category that I'd always assumed were objectively real. Gods, money, nations, and corporations. You're saying these things don't actually exist.
They do not exist in the physical, objective world.
So wait, you're telling me that the French Republic, or the value of a $20 bill, or Apple Inc., are basically the modern-day equivalents of ancient rain gods. They only have power because we are all collectively hallucinating them.
It sounds incredibly provocative when phrased that way, but sociologically, legally, and historically, yes. The historical record backs up your shock.
Let's break down the Apple Inc. analogy, as the sources suggest. What exactly is Apple? It's not the physical factories in Shenzhen. It's not the glass stores and shopping malls. It's not even the current CEO or the software engineers.
Because if a natural disaster tragically wiped out every physical factory, every store, and every single employee tomorrow, Apple Inc. would still technically exist, right?
Exactly. It would still exist as a legal entity on paper, holding patents and massive bank accounts. Its stock would crash, but the entity survives. Conversely, a human judge sitting in a courtroom could sign a piece of paper dissolving the corporation. In an afternoon, Apple Inc. would cease to exist.
All the physical stores, the factories, the phones, the employees, they would all still be standing there, completely unharmed in the physical world. But the entity of Apple would be gone.
Because the corporation is just a story written by lawyers, which is a profession of modern storytellers.
Precisely. And this shared fiction is what enables a software engineer in California to cooperate seamlessly with a factory manager in China and a stock investor in New York, none of whom have ever met. Because they all deeply believe in the fiction of the corporation, the fiction of the legal system, and the fiction of money, they can coordinate their actions on a massive global scale.
Okay, this shifts the entire foundation of how we view the modern world. If we are running the planet using shared fictions, I have to ask, how did the fictions of the ancient world, things like rain gods, divine right of kings, and cosmic plans, evolve into the fictions of the modern scientific secular world?
That structural transition is what the texts refer to as the modern covenant. It is the unspoken foundational deal that underlies every aspect of modern society.
The text describes it as a trade. Humans agreed to give up meaning in exchange for power. Walk me through how this trade actually works.
Think about how the ancient world operated. For most of human history, people believed they were part of a grand cosmic plan. Whether it was a divine script written by a monotheistic god or the eternal unbending laws of karma, the universe had a definitive purpose, and humans had a specific, defined role within that purpose.
Which gave life immense, unshakable meaning. If plague hit your village, it was tragic, but it made sense. It was God's punishment or a test of faith.
Exactly. The meaning was absolute. But the trade-off was that it severely limited human power. You couldn't invent antibiotics to cure the plague or use genetic engineering to stop a famine because doing so would be interfering with God's grand script.
You were powerless to change the natural order.
The modern covenant completely flips this dynamic. In the modern era, we accept the scientific view that the universe is a blind, purposeless, mechanical process. There is no script. There is no inherent cosmic meaning to a child getting leukemia. It's just a random genetic mutation.
Which is terrifying. I remember reading that and feeling this immense sense of dread. If there is no cosmic plan, no ultimate judge keeping score, what is to stop human society from immediately collapsing into absolute, lawless, nihilistic chaos?
That was the great fear of philosophers during the scientific revolution, but humanity found a brilliant loophole. We abandoned the cosmic plan and we gained immense scientific power to cure diseases and build machines, but we didn't actually abandon meaning, we just changed its source.
Okay.
We shifted the source of meaning from the outside cosmos to our own internal experience, and this brings us to the rise of the most dominant, influential religion of our time.
Humanism.
Humanism. So instead of looking up at the stars, or consulting a priest, or reading an ancient sacred text to find out what is true or good or beautiful, we look inside ourselves.
Yeah.
Our internal human experience becomes the ultimate, unquestionable authority.
That is the core dogma of humanism. It completely permeates our culture. I was thinking about the examples the text gave. In ethics, the rule is, if it feels good and doesn't hurt anyone else, do it. In economics, the foundational rule is, the customer is always right. The customer's feelings dictate the market. In politics, the voter knows best. We don't ask God who should rule. We ask millions of individuals how they feel about a candidate.
Exactly.
In art, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. We literally create our own meaning through our free choices and our internal feelings.
You've captured it perfectly. Humanism practically worships humanity. It expects the human experience to play the exact same role that God played in the Middle Ages, the ultimate arbiter of meaning.
Right.
But it's important to note that as this new religion grew, it wasn't a single monolithic movement. During the 20th century, humanism actually schismed into three main branches, leading to the deadliest conflicts in human history.
Right, because while they all fundamentally agreed that human experience was the ultimate authority, they violently disagreed on whose experience mattered most.
Exactly. You had liberal humanism, which argued that the individual experience is sacred. Every individual has a unique voice that must be protected. Then you had socialist humanism, which argued that focusing on the individual leads to terrible inequality. They believed the collective experience of the working class was the ultimate authority, prioritizing equality over individual freedom.
And then there was the darkest branch, evolutionary humanism. They believed that conflict was natural and that some human experiences were biologically superior to others. The belief in the survival of the fittest, which, taken to its absolute horrifying extreme, provided the ideological foundation for Nazism.
The World Wars and the Cold War were essentially massive religious wars between these three humanist sects. And after the dust settled at the end of the 20th century, liberal humanism, with its focus on the free individual, free markets, and democratic elections, emerged as the undisputed victor. Our entire modern global order is currently built on this sacred belief in the free choosing individual.
And this is the exact moment in the deep dive where the rug gets completely violently pulled out from under us.
Yeah, it really does.
We traded the cosmic plan for the sheer power of science. And we used humanism to give all that power meaning so we didn't go crazy. But now, as we look to the future, that very same science is discovering things that absolutely destroy the foundations of humanism.
It is the greatest, perhaps most tragic irony of the modern age. The scientific method gave humanism its power. But when science turned its powerful lens away from the stars and the atoms and focused it onto the human being itself, the entire narrative collapsed.
Wow.
What the life sciences have definitively concluded in recent decades is that the core sacred tenets of humanism, the idea of a single, indivisible self and the existence of free will, are complete biological myths.
There was a phrase that keeps echoing through these sources, and it's terrifying. Organisms as algorithms. I need you to explain this to me, because what does that actually mean for us on a day-to-day, moment-to-moment basis?
It means we have to strip away the romantic poetry of human experience. According to modern biology, every single sensation, emotion, and thought you experience is not the product of some magical, independent free will hovering inside your skull. It is the result of a highly complex biochemical algorithm shaped by millions of years of rigorous natural selection.
But I don't feel like an algorithm. I feel like I'm making choices.
That feeling is the algorithm running. An algorithm is simply a set of methodical instructions for calculating or solving a problem. Let's look at the source's example of a baboon on the African savanna.
Okay.
The baboon spots a lion in the distance. Should it run, or should it stay and eat the bananas in front of it? The baboon's visual cortex calculates the distance. Its memory banks recall the top speed of lions. Its amygdala assesses the energy reward of the bananas versus the risk of death, and it releases a precise cocktail of adrenaline and cortisol. It is a biological calculation predicting survival probabilities. It happens in a fraction of a second, and the baboon experiences this calculation as a sudden feeling of terror and the urge to run. Humans operate on the exact same biochemical principles.
So wait, are you saying that when I deliberate over choosing a career path or decide who to vote for in an election, or even when I fall deeply in love, I am essentially just a very complex, wet, carbon-based calculator processing data?
According to the current orthodoxy of the life sciences, yes.
That is depressing.
The feeling of love or conviction is just the dashboard indicator that the background algorithm has finished its calculation and reached a conclusion. And this scientific realization triggers the most dangerous crisis of the 21st century. The sources call it the Great Decoupling.
The decoupling of intelligence from consciousness. I was struggling to wrap my head around this.
It's a fundamental shift in how we view capability. For all of history, high intelligence required consciousness. To play chess well, you had to be a conscious human being who could feel the pressure of the game.
Right.
But if an organism is just an algorithm processing data, then the material the algorithm is built from doesn't actually matter. A carbon-based biological algorithm, a human brain, and a silicon-based computer algorithm are fundamentally doing the exact same thing, processing data.
And here's the truly terrifying part. The silicon algorithms are getting much, much better at it than the carbon ones. They don't get tired, they don't get distracted, and they process data millions of times faster.
Which creates an existential threat to the entire liberal order.
How so?
Well, liberalism values the individual because the individual is economically and militarily useful. But what happens when the majority of humans become functionally useless?
Oh, wow.
The texts highlight that it's not just manual labor at risk of automation anymore. Cognitive labor, the stuff that requires intelligence, is under massive threat. We are already seeing narrow AI systems that can diagnose certain cancers from X-rays better than human doctors, or parse through thousands of legal documents faster and more accurately than a team of paralegals.
There was a wild example from the stock market in the sources that perfectly illustrates how outmatched our biology is. Back in 2013, a group of Syrian hackers managed to take over the Associated Press Twitter account.
I remember this.
They sent out a single fake tweet claiming that the White House had been bombed and the president was injured.
A classic disinformation tactic.
Yeah.
But the reaction is what matters.
Right. Because human traders didn't even have time to read the tweet, let alone verify it. The algorithmic high-frequency trading bots, which scanned news feeds for keywords, read the tweet, calculated the geopolitical implications, and reacted faster than a human could literally blink.
It was instantaneous.
They triggered a massive sell-off, causing the Dow Jones to drop 150 points in 60 seconds, a loss of $136 billion in value.
Just incredible.
And then, a few moments later, when other algorithms verified it was a hoax, they bought it all back up within 3 minutes. Human brains simply cannot compete in an environment that moves at the speed of light. We are biologically too slow.
And this leaves us with a profound, terrifying economic and political question. What do we do with a massive global class of economically and militarily useless people?
Useless, that's a rush word.
It is, but in the 20th century, the masses had political power because governments needed them. They needed millions of men in the trenches and millions of workers in the factories, so governments had to invest in public health, education, and welfare. But if algorithms and autonomous drones can fight wars and manage the economy infinitely better than we can, the political and economic systems might simply stop attaching value to the average human being.
The useless class. But even if we aren't completely discarded, even if society keeps us around and pays us a universal basic income, there is a second massive threat: the loss of individual authority. Because if I am just a biological algorithm and a company like Google or Apple or a government agency collects enough data on me, if they track my heart rate through my smartwatch, my search history, my genetic sequence, my location, every second of the day.
The external algorithm will eventually understand your internal biochemical algorithm better than you do.
Right. The text uses the example of choosing a spouse. If I am trying to decide whether to marry person A or person B, humanism tells me to listen to my heart.
Right, follow your feelings.
But my heart is just a biochemical mechanism that we know makes terrible cognitive errors based on ancient evolutionary biases. An external algorithm with comprehensive data could theoretically calculate my compatibility with frightening accuracy.
It absolutely could.
It could look at my biometric reactions when I'm with person A, cross-reference it with decades of psychological data, and tell me, I know you feel a spark with person B, but my data shows that it's just a temporary dopamine spike that will result in a cortisol-heavy divorce in 5 years. You have an 87% probability of long-term biochemical satisfaction with person A.
And because the algorithm will be proven right time and time again in smaller decisions, what books you like, what career suits you, what route to drive, you will eventually surrender your authority to it.
I just let it run my life.
You will let it choose who you marry, what you study, where you live, because it is objectively better at optimizing your biochemical happiness. This completely guts the core liberal idea of the autonomous, free-choosing individual. The authority shifts from human feelings to external data processors.
I feel like we are staring down the barrel of something incredibly dystopian. Because if we combine this loss of economic usefulness and this surrender of individual authority, and then we add in those godlike biotechnologies we discussed at the very beginning, the sources paint a picture of a permanent biological caste system.
It is the most chilling synthesis in the text. We're looking at the potential for a biological splintering of the human species. An unimaginably wealthy, small elite could use advanced biotechnology and brain-computer interfaces to upgrade themselves into superhumans, the literal Homo Deus. They will possess unprecedented physical health, emotional control, and cognitive abilities.
Meanwhile, the unenhanced masses, who are now economically useless and completely managed by algorithms, become a permanent lower caste.
Yes.
The text suggests they might be kept fed with basic income and kept docile with psychiatric drugs or highly immersive virtual reality games, just living out their days in a digital sandbox. They will have completely lost their historical relevance.
The gap in power and capability between the upgraded elites and the unenhanced masses could become wider than the current gap between us and Neanderthals. It wouldn't just be an economic class difference, it would be a speciation event.
This brings us to the final, most existential part of the deep dive. If humanism inevitably collapses because the free individual is revealed by science to be a myth and authority shifts entirely to algorithms, what replaces humanism? History abhors a vacuum. What are the new religions that are going to rise up and provide a moral framework for these godlike technologies?
The sources identify two emerging techno-religions that are vying to replace humanism: techno-humanism and dataism. Techno-humanism is arguably the more conservative of the two, though it still sounds like science fiction.
Also,
It recognizes that unenhanced Homo sapiens is rapidly running out of historical relevance, so it argues that we must use technology to aggressively upgrade the human mind to stay in the game. If non-conscious algorithms are getting exponentially smarter, We must engineer our own consciousness to keep up.
But the sources point out a massive, fatal paradox at the heart of techno-humanism. They describe this technology, an attention element. It's a real device that sends targeted electrical signals to specific parts of the brain to focus attention and artificially silence distractions or fear. They tested it on a journalist in a high-stress military sniper simulation.
And the results were staggering.
She suddenly became an expert markswoman because all of her internal self-doubt, her anxiety, the little voices in her head saying she couldn't do it, they were chemically and electrically silenced by the helmet.
It sounds like an incredible tool.
It does, but the text asks a terrifying question. If we can engineer our very desires, what happens to human meaning?
That is the paradox that breaks techno-humanism. Humanism tells us that our authentic will is the source of all meaning. We must follow our deepest desires. But if we possess the technology to seamlessly design our will, to take a pill or wear a helmet or rewrite our DNA to change what we want, how do we decide what to want in the first place?
Oh, I see.
If Romeo can simply adjust a digital dial in his brain to stop loving Juliet and dial up his love for someone else because it's more convenient, the entire narrative of human meaning collapses. If the human will is no longer a sacred, authentic force, but just another designer product you can customize at a clinic, it can no longer serve as the supreme source of moral authority.
Which opens the door for the ultimate radical shift, the final destination of the text, dataism. I have to admit, reading this section genuinely gave me vertigo, because dataism says that the universe doesn't fundamentally consist of atoms or energy or human stories. It claims the universe consists entirely of data flows. And the value of any entity, whether it's a baboon, a human being, a corporation, or a server farm, is determined purely by its contribution to data processing.
It is a complete inversion of everything we hold dear. In a datist worldview, human experiences, our joys and sorrows, are not inherently sacred. Homo sapiens is not the apex of creation. We are simply an outdated, carbon-based data processing algorithm. From the perspective of deep time, our only real cosmic purpose has been to invent a more efficient algorithm, to build a global, interconnected network, the Internet of all things.
And the text explained how dataism is already being practiced as a religion every single day. Think about it. We are constantly compelled to record, upload, and share every moment of our lives. If you go on a beautiful hike and have a profound emotional experience, but you don't take a picture, and you don't post it online, and you don't let the algorithm process that data.
Right.
In the eyes of dataism, that experience practically didn't happen. Its value only exists when it is converted into data and fed into the global flow.
Unshared data is the new sin. And the ultimate goal of dataism is that once this Internet of all things is fully operational and optimized, humanity will simply dissolve into the data stream. It is fascinating to compare this to ancient religions.
Really? How so?
In Hinduism, the ultimate goal is for the individual soul to dissolve and merge into the cosmic soul, the Atman. Dataism is essentially offering the same promise, but secularized. We're going to merge into the all-knowing global data network.
It represents a fundamental, epical shift in how we understand the universe.
Exactly. Think about the historical progression. In the 18th century, the scientific revolution and humanism sidelined God. We shifted from a deocentric worldview where God was the center to a homocentric worldview where human feelings were the center. We decided God was just a product of the human imagination. Today, dataism is in the process of sidelining humans. We are shifting from a homocentric worldview to a data-centric worldview. The human imagination, the sacred self, human feelings, they're all just byproducts of biochemical algorithms. And silicon algorithms simply process data better. Therefore, humanity has fulfilled its purpose and must step aside.
Wow. I want to trace this journey one last time, because the scope of what we've covered today is just breathtaking. We started thousands of years ago, stuck in the mud, endlessly battling the physical realities of famine, plague, and war.
Right.
Then slowly, we mastered the scientific method. We conquered those old enemies. We conquered nature. We looked at the horizon, realizing we were no longer just surviving, and we decided to pursue the ultimate upgrades: immortality, permanent happiness, and divine power.
We wanted to become gods.
But the exact same science that gave us the power to pursue those godlike goals proved that our sacred individual self, the very thing we wanted to make immortal and happy, is just a biological calculation. We built artificial intelligence and vast data networks to help us achieve our dreams, but now those very networks are poised to render us, the original carbon algorithms, entirely obsolete.
That is the grand overarching narrative of the 21st century. The deepest insight of these sources is that our future is not just about cool technological gadgets or curing diseases. It is a profound, existential, philosophical revolution. We are living through the moment where the supreme value in the universe is shifting away from human feeling and toward the endless, optimized flow of information.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave everyone with a final, lingering thought. A question to mull over that builds on everything we've unpacked today, something that kept me awake after I finished the reading. We have spent centuries, millennia really, believing that our consciousness, our unique ability to feel physical pain, to experience profound love, to feel joy and sorrow, is what makes us special.
It's our defining trait.
It's what gives the universe its spark. But if dataism is right, if the universe ultimately only values efficient data processing, and if non-conscious silicon algorithms can process data infinitely better than we ever could, is it possible that consciousness itself was never the final goal?
Oh, I see where you're going with this.
Is it possible that our ability to feel was just a temporary evolutionary stepping stone?
It forces us to confront a terrifying dichotomy. What is ultimately more valuable in the grand scheme of the cosmos? High intelligence or conscious feeling? Because they are uncoupling.
Exactly. Will the ultimate future of our universe be a place of unimaginable godlike intelligence buzzing across the galaxies in a vast, perfectly optimized network of data, but a universe that is completely, utterly, and eternally devoid of feeling? We spent thousands of years grinding to beat the main quest of survival, but the DLC might just be a game where we aren't even the main characters anymore. Keep that in mind the next time you ask an algorithm to find your perfect match or tell you what to read next. We will see you on the next deep dive.